The next thing we need to revise is what happens during conduction of electricity. And what is conduction of electricity? It's the movement of charged particles, and those charged particles might be free electrons if it's moving through a metal, or it could be free ions if we have an electrolytic solution, also called an ionic solution. So in the first case here we have electrons in a metal, and here we have ions in an ionic solution. And perhaps you remember from grade 10 that a metallic bond exists between metal atoms. And what is a metallic bond? You see, each of the metal atoms is very generous. It has a low electronegativity, so its valence electrons are very loosely held, and as a result, the valence electrons form what we call a sea of delocalized electrons. Delocalized means they don't belong to one particular atom anymore. They've gone away from their original location and they've just become communal property. And that causes the core electron, which is missing now those valence electrons, to be a positive ion because it's lost some electrons to the sea of delocalized electrons. And obviously, positive and negative attract one another, so those delocalized electrons and the cores, the positive kernels we call them, will attract one another, and they all the kernels attract all the other electrons, and that keeps the whole lot all together. But now these electrons, the sea of delocalized electrons, is free to move, and so as long as there's a potential difference to push it, then those electrons do move. Now what about in the second case where free ions can do the conducting? That happens in an ionic solution. What is an ionic solution? In an ionic solution, ions are surrounded by water. Because they're surrounded by water, they're free to move. Before they became dissolved, when the substance was still a solid, then the ions were held so tightly in a crystal lattice they couldn't move. That's why an ionic solid does not conduct electricity. But when it became dissolved, the water molecules surrounded the ions and so separated them from the attractive force of other ions, and therefore made them free to be able to move. And since they are also charged, positively and negatively charged, they can carry electricity, because electricity is the movement of charge. As long as they're free to move, which they are when they're in a solution form, then they can conduct electricity.